Hi, this is Paul. Lance today. Lance is someone in this little corner. You probably haven't seen him a lot on my channel. You'll see him fairly often on the live streams. He was very active in the Bridges of Meaning Discord server. He really sort of held a lot of those live streaming rooms together. He's doing some of that now on Grail Country and on Luke's streaming channel. He had been a house church pastor. He had been in a variety of Protestant denominations, and now he is Orthodox. And he did a live stream today, which I thought, again, was continuing to flesh out the question of, okay, what's going on right now with this overall Orthodox Renaissance in America? And I've spoken about this quite a bit. I know a lot of people, some people ask, well, why do you keep talking about this? I keep talking about this not just because I'm happy that the Orthodox are having this renaissance, which I am. I am talking about this because there are things to learn that all of the churches can learn from. As Sam had mentioned in an earlier conversation, in an earlier stream about this, as Sam noted, oh, don't worry, once Protestant evangelicals figure out what's working for other churches, they will jump on the bandwagon and they will do it too. That's sort of the nature of it's sort of the nature of evangelicalism. It's a very pragmatic tradition that really looks to achieve certain ends. So Lance begins with this video from Father, oh, I forget his name. He's the co-host of Lord of Spirits podcast, and so Lance does a little bit of commenting on this. This video popped up for me. I haven't watched it, but it's kind of nice that Lance was watching it because Lance can get to some of the good stuff, so I don't have to, he'll do the editing for me, so I don't have to watch it. So I'll play a little bit of it, and then I'm going to include more of this particular stream later in this video, but I was actually over the weekend thinking about this topic again because I think about it fairly regularly because, again, a lot of the people that I have engaged with over the last 5-6 years have gone to Orthodoxy. And again, I celebrate that, but I am very curious about, okay, well, what exactly is really going on in the culture? Because on one hand, you've got a tremendous number of people leaving the church, and now you've got some people going into this. Now, it's important to remember, as was on the Ready to Harvest channel, that overall, Orthodoxy in America is in decline in terms of the gross numbers. And that sounds strange because, well, why would it be in decline? Well, because the vast majority of people who participate in Orthodox churches in the United States are immigrants. And those immigrants are sort of like the Christian Reformed Church, sort of joining the rest of the culture. And so what that means for many people is they are no longer participating in churches and they are getting more and more American. And American, unlike certain other older nations like Greece or Macedonia, some of these cultures that had, it's not exactly a state church, but let's say a cultural religion. So when they become Americans, they stop being Greek Orthodox. And because the numbers of Orthodox in the United States and Canada, but I will just talk about the United States because that's so many more people in Canada. The number of Orthodox, by and large, are immigrants. Their overall numbers are declining, even though they're seeing growth. Now, it's helpful to remember that also, I was just looking at some statistics. Roman Catholic Church is about 1 billion people in the world. Orthodox, that's all the Orthodoxies together, about 200,000. Or 200 million, I'm sorry, not 200,000, 200 million. So, and those, of course, are sort of cultural Christians. I want to do a video looking much more at these layers because that actually comes through. I might take a little bit more of this video. I just don't have the time today to do a lot with this. But let's play a little bit and talk a little bit more.
Some people will say, well, there's been this sort of shift in this direction or that direction in the church, and therefore all these people are coming in and look, they all seem to be this kind. But here's the thing. I've noticed some people will say, okay, a lot of people are coming in because they have particular political views or this kind of thing. And certainly there are some people that is the case. But again, this is anecdotal, but I have talked with a lot of people. And while, yes, there does seem to be a tilt towards young men, there is generally a tilt towards younger people. Now, before we get too excited about that, the truth is that almost everyone who changes religions, you can go look this up, almost everybody who changes religions at least one point in their life does so under the age of 40. That's just generally true. So people tend to change from one thing to another when they're a young adult, right? So it should not be a surprise that we're seeing younger people who are becoming Orthodox, or at least showing up at our doors. That is normal most of the time. But is there something that the Orthodox Church has done to try to attract these people? There's not. There's not been some big program, especially not a nationwide program with like all the jurisdictions, and definitely not a worldwide program where we said, let's do a big evangelistic push, right? Neither has there been some kind of like big shift in terms of the makeup of our leadership, right? The leadership hasn't suddenly shifted in one direction, ideologically, theologically, whatever. I mean, the church is kind of what it is. We don't tend to track these changes in terms of 5 or even 10 or 20 or even 100 years. We track them in centuries of the Orthodox Church. There's not some big change that's happened. And frankly, you know,
Luke, I think you're right on that, right? And
I think Luke is right on that too. Certainly Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Pageau, the Peterson-Pageau pipeline, have certainly contributed this. And I think it is noteworthy that, unlike how many other churches that sort of bend over backwards to try to do this, this has in some ways just happened. Now you can say this is a gift of God, which I think is a great thing to say, and it's true. I think you can also say the reason to pay attention to this is because this is a tell. This is a sign. You can understand deep changes in the culture by what's going on here. Now, I have a few slides that I made. Actually, I made these Saturday or Sunday morning about this before this video from Lance just came out today. I think orthodoxy is filling some gaps, and I think some of these gaps are very ironic. I made a video a few weeks ago about the Peterson-Pageau pipeline and immanentism, sort of immanentizing the eschaton. Now, this was a comment on the Peterson-Pageau pipeline as effectively immanentizing the Bible video, and I recognize the icon or the emoticon or whatever the little picture is, so I know who this is. And this is what he says. I'm not going to give his name here because it's CNA Art Design. Every once in a while, you condense and express years of my own growth in a few minutes. Immanence versus anticipation. The Peterson-Pageau pipeline. Immanentization is how I went from atheist to baptized Christian with barely a thought of the afterlife. There is no anticipation. My conversion was entirely based on the immanent structure. Now my areas of growth are towards the more personal, relational, and anticipated aspects. And I think that is right. And I think part of what, maybe I'll have the third slide here. Ironically, I think orthodoxy is picking up where the American secular mainline left off. Now that sounds super counterintuitive, but what happened with modernist Protestantism as it continued to sort of progress through the centuries, and then especially during the Cold War and after the Cold War, became sort of entirely cultural religion. It was completely immanentized, and people were deeply skeptical about the afterlife. And so now comes along Peterson and Pageau, and they immanentize the eschaton. And that fits then with people who had basically gone through the deconstruction, and they are deeply skeptical. In fact, they weren't even caring about afterlife. Now, I just actually had a conversation today with someone who I got to know early on in the channel, hasn't been around the corner very much lately, but perhaps might be a little bit more incoming. And we talked about this because part of this is youth. And part of this is youth in affluent, secure modernity. Because for most of human history, no matter what age you were, you had a steep realization that tomorrow wasn't promised to you. And even though we say tomorrow isn't promised to you, and it is true, for the vast majority of people living in Western, secure, affluent countries, the odds are they haven't tasted a lot of death. And so after-death issues aren't really at the forefront of their mind or their imagination. And part of what happened in terms of the fall off of traditional Catholicism and evangelical, more conservative elements of Protestantism. It was into the 80s and 90s when evangelism explosion was still promoting an evangelistic process by which people would go out door to door and they would knock on doors as if, in fact, people are going to open their doors to total strangers and not expect a Jehovah's Witness. That can work, as Sam was talking about in a previous live stream, but they would knock on doors, and the big question they would ask was, if you were to die tonight, what would you tell Jesus to let you into his kingdom? Now, first of all, in a highly secularized society, they say, number one, I think when I die, I'm just dead. Number two, what makes you think Jesus will open the door up there when there's Buddha? And so, in other words, they're facing both, not a lot of thinking about afterlife, and they're dealing with pluralism. And so what immanentizing has done basically was sort of cut the legs out from pluralism, in some ways sort of using science. There's a fair amount of evolutionary biology assumption beneath a lot of these conversations. And so in many ways, the orthodoxy has sort of taken the handoff from secularized Protestantism that has kind of gone to seed. And it's done so exactly, this comment says it best. Every once in a while, you condense and express years of my own growth in a few minutes. Immanence versus anticipation. The Peterson-Peugeot immanentization is how I went from atheist to baptized Christian, baptized Orthodox, with barely a thought of the afterlife. There's no anticipation. My conversion was entirely based on immanent structure. Now my area of growth are towards the more personal, relational, anticipated aspects. And I think that's right. So there's an interesting, deep relationship between the decaying mainline and this new flourishing of converts within Orthodoxy today. One of those connections is the immanentization. And that's where Peterson and Peugeot sort of pick up sort of the collapse of the mainline and pick up people, also the meaning crisis. They're picking up people who are sort of lost in nihilism and saying, oh, this makes sense because of the immanentization. There's another element at which this makes sense, which was part of what pluralism did with respect to traditional Catholicism, which tended to be heavily life after death, anticipated salvation oriented. You can listen to my last two sermons where I talk about anticipated salvation and realized salvation. They tended to be anticipated orient. Where are you going to go after you die? And part of what pluralism did was make broad, in a pluralistic society, it made a lot of people skeptical about, how can we say this, tribalist hell selection. We'll say it that way. So if you're not the Christian or the right kind of Christian, then you're going to hell. Everybody's going to hell except the right kind of Christian. Now, evangelicalism broadened this. Bible-believing Christians, if you've asked Jesus into your heart, if you've made Jesus your Lord and Savior, if you have a personal relationship with Jesus. You can already see that broadening in evangelicalism. Catholics sort of got on board, some Catholics, but still even in the corner, the Catholics are they as tribal as some ortho bros? See, this is where the Orthodox are interesting, because you can look at someone like Luke Thompson, although he is in some ways a Bible thumper. Because of his universalism, there's an openness to it. There's a deep openness to sort of the Grail country perennialist side of the corner. And because there has been, and often you'll hear George MacDonald, another, this in that case, a Scottish Universalist. Universalism is, again, one of these issues that pluralism deeply promotes, because suddenly you don't have to worry about your little Islamic friends and your little Jewish friends and your little whatever tribe of Christian friends that are out of bounds for you. You don't have to worry about them going to heaven when you die. In fact, you're not worrying about judgment. And again, this is the common culture that pervades the United States. Now, it's always very shallow, and it's always just beneath the surface, because if you sort of lean into people a little bit and you say, well, what about hell? I don't believe in hell. Say, oh, okay, well, what about Mao, Stalin, and Hitler? Well, maybe hell for them. Okay, anybody else? Well, my neighbor with the barking dog. So you tend to get genocidal dictators and people that we think are bad. Genocidal dictators, maybe pedophiles, and then annoying neighbors. These are the people going to hell. Everyone else is a good person, and so when they die, they go somewhere. Even though atheism made significant inroads into the country, I very seldom find people who will, not people on the internet, I felt very seldom find people in real life who don't in some ways hope for and anticipate. Even Steve Jobs, if you read that biography of him by, I can't remember the author's name, but it's a recent biography. Even Steve Jobs, when he was dying of pancreatic cancer, was speculating about an afterlife. And this happens when you get old, because when you get old, you realize that dying is not just hypothetical. Dying is real. People around me are dying. My parents have already died. Their generation is already gone. I have a sister who died. Other people around me are dying. So now suddenly, it's part of the reason old people go to church, because they're thinking, what if there is an afterlife? I better not take any chances. And even when they do go to church, and even if they go to a conservative church, even they go to a conservative church that, let's say, practices exclusive tribal salvationism, let's phrase it that way, that just us and our little group are saved and everybody else, sorry, to the flames, even they will always soften it. And I think that's just part of our pluralistic, saturated culture where we really have an emphasis on being nice. That's deep in our cultural roots. So immanentism sort of solves the problem of relevance, and universalism sort of solves the problem of hell. Now, not everybody in Orthodoxy is a universalist. And one of the interesting things about Orthodoxy is the more I get into it and the more I pay attention to it, the chaotic nature of it. You'll find, I just learned that there's actually a progressive wing of Orthodoxy. It's like, oh, well, that's interesting. And if I'd sort of had inklings of that before, because when Jonathan Peugeot, when I did my first conversations with him, he was talking about getting into traditional iconography as opposed to, oh, so you mean there's like modernist iconography? I bet you there is. So, and this, in a subsequent video, when I get into sort of the question of civilizational Christianity or cultural Christianity, as opposed to, let's say, personal Christianity. So if you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, that's sort of individualism in Christianity now to personal Christianity. Whereas even Richard Dawkins can say, well, I want to be a cultural Christian. So we're going to have to look at those different levels, because even though most people don't sit and talk about those different levels, those levels are operating deeply within their psyche, and that is adding motivation. And it's also adding questions of status, because if you're just out there in a street corner basically saying, me and my little fundamentalist Bible church over there on Stockton Boulevard, we're going to heaven. The rest of y'all, I don't know. Culturally, that just isn't a good look. So now if you say, well, we Catholics and everyone else, I don't know. Culturally, it's not a good look. So people tend to soften it. They might think it, but they'll soften it in public because they don't want to lose status and they don't want to lose influence. Then you have the problem with the body, and I think this is one that I've talked about for a very long time. Part of the reason why sacramental, different traditions of Christianity that are highly sacramental are big right now, because remember, embody, we're sort of in a movement about embodying, and it's ironic. I think it's a little compensatory, because as a culture we tend to be going in the other direction, where now we're sort of floating out of our body, and I can be a man, a woman, a dog, a cat. I can be a 15th century woman if I declare myself to be so. And so we see this tension, and the more people sort of go up, other people are going to go down into the body. And I think for many people who are sort of temperamentally given to conservatism, well, orthodoxy kind of, Lance will talk about in this video, the program's already there, and it's been there for a long time. And it seems in orthodoxy that even though you can find some people who are like, this is the program, there are other people that are like, we'll do a little this, we'll do a little that, do a little this, do a little that. And some people say, no, that's not really what Orthodox do. And other people are like, maybe some people are doing it and they're not talking about it. And one of the most interesting, And so anyway, I got to finish this up and then I'll jump back to the video. Cool ways to be conservative without the ugliness of post-Christian conservatism. And so now suddenly you still have a sexual ethic and you have a communal sexual ethic. And we talked about in our estuary yesterday that if you decide, well, actually I want to do a video on sincerity, authenticity, and prophilicity, because I walked through that with the estuary yesterday, because I found that to be a fairly quick way to help people make sense of a lot of the social changes happening. So what Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Anglicanism sort of offer, partly because they still have vestments, partly because their clergy are running around in strange clothing so you don't have to, partly because they're so countercultural, it sort of gives you a pass, ironically, in our cultural, partly because of pluralism, because you could say, well, I'm Orthodox, so I have a right to be weird. Whereas if you're a Protestant, it's like, how weird can you really be? Because certain kinds of Protestant weirdness are just not cool. But certain kinds of other weirdness, especially if they involve clothing, you see this in California. Every now and then you'll watch somebody walk around with a shaved head and a saffron garb, which is sort of a Buddhist thing, and all the Californians will go, oh, they're really spiritual. They have spiritual clothing on. And so, if you're Catholic or Orthodox and you're wearing the black thing and you've got the long hair, people be like, I don't know anything about Orthodox. It must be really spiritual because they're wearing special clothes. And that actually passes in our culture. Whereas if you're Ned Flanders from The Simpsons, well, then you're just odd, and then you're just weird, and then everybody thinks that they maybe get like the what is that Baptist church that we're always protesting at things. I forget their name right now. Anyway, so you can get a lot of this by being Orthodox and not being sort of American Baptist weird. And so it's an upgrade. And I've got a conversation planned pretty soon with Richard Rowland. And so from sort of being a Baptist, well, maybe if you're in the Bible Belt, being a Baptist is okay because you're not too weird because at least your tribe is big and everybody understands that. But then you go to Orthodoxy. Now it's sort of like, it's sort of like being a white girl in an elementary school now, and everybody looks at you and you're like, well, I'm non-binary, because now suddenly, bang, you got status because you're weird enough to not be normal, and the last thing you want to be is unexceptional. And I'm not saying any of this to sort of say this is what's going on in people's minds consciously. I think generally speaking, these things are going to have tugs, and I think they're going to have influence. Okay, so I'm gonna drop in, or I'm gonna try to drop in. Maybe I won't drop in. I'll just leave the link to it. I played a little bit of it if you want to see it. Joseph, who's been on my channel a couple of times, who is, again, every time he is constructively critiquing orthodoxy and the ortho bros from deep inside it. Because, again, he is studying to be an Orthodox deacon. So he is actually doing the work, to use a wokish phrase. He's actually doing the work. But because it's not dissimilar to me, who has plenty of critiques and criticisms about the Christian Reformed Church, even though I happily remain within it, because if you happily remain within it, you see all of the flaws, and because you love it, you want to see it improve. And so that's part of the reason that Joseph makes the comments that he does. So, yep, link below about Lance's video, and I still have to watch this Father Stephen Domick video. See, I remembered his name. It always bubbles up. But yeah, so I guess this will be a shortish video. Who knows? Maybe I will. Maybe if this video is longer than how long it is right now, then I added a clip. If not, I didn't. Got a bunch of stuff I got to do tonight. Don't know if I have time to do any editing. So there are my thoughts. Leave a comment.
Yeah, you can't talk about orthodoxy and positivity without me showing up to ruin the party. So there I am.
Well, and I think one of the things is definitely, I think orthodoxy is a part of that, because what they were saying is I love what Father Damick is. He's like, guys, we didn't do anything. Like, there wasn't some big evangelicalized program that's going on. People are just showing up to their doors. But I also think, and I certainly will talk about the orthodoxy thing, but I wanted to point out, and I loved how Father Damick in his video was saying, hey, this isn't just us. Like, there's things happening in other traditional traditional in the West, that there seems to be what people are being attracted to. Primarily, there's a shift that's happening there, and Emily pointed out there are certainly new people. There are booming. Listen, there are booming mega churches, relevant seeker churches that still exist out there. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but the fact that there's this push coming in these traditional people seeking the traditional things, that is a fundamental shift that we have not seen since, I don't know, like since Vatican II.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of reasons why people are. It's kind of like I re-listened to the Jordan Hall conversation with Paul, and like they came up with this idea of the meta crisis because there was all these the poly crisis or whatever. There was all these different environmental or security problems, or all these different problems playing out, but there was a hierarchy where this was refracting like a prism with light. And I think you're seeing that with the converts to Orthodoxy. They're grasping onto this, well, and with the Roman Catholic world too, and like the continuing Anglican world as well. People are trying to grasp onto something vague. They don't want something vague and undefined and arbitrary in terms of worship and theology. So Father Stephen's totally right. The Orthodox Church did nothing to bring this. It's just a secondary cause of people realizing we need something rooted in, not arbitrariness. We need something transcendent here. But there's a lot of comments popping up here if you wanted to.
Yeah, McMo come in. So McMo come in, and I love it. Like I'm also snarky, funny guy in the comments. I get that. Like that's part of my humor. Whatever I try to add this, but it's not the point I'm making, right? Because I do think, again, my friends who know me know for the past. My wife, she laughed about this because we watched this video because she heard me talk about this all the time. I've been noticing this for over 15 years. And it's not bad because lots of people go there. That's not what I'm making. If you pay attention to people who are deconstructing, if you pay attention to the movements of what's happening there, when you see the circus that came up out of that James Rivers thing, the whole Mark Driscoll thing, that whatever the things that are playing out of it, like I've dealt with a lot of people at house churches, wherever. I've dealt with like someone like Francis Chan who left. Here he is. Francis Chan, who left Simi Valley a lot ago because he also saw issues with mega churches. I've seen a lot of pastors doing it. There's something deeper going on behind the scenes that I think is speaking to that model that's not meeting them, that I don't think is going to meet the moment for the long haul.
Yeah, so how to talk about this. I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but
no, that's what I'm here for. That's right. What I'm here for.
Yeah, I don't want to be like you, so I'm going to try to do something different.
Wait, do you go to a mega church?
I got fired from a mega church. So I'm not, I'm not going to be the mega church defender either. So that's why it's a complex subject. I think I had a conversation with Christian Baxter about all of this, and I'm not sure if I was in the right frame of mind, or I wasn't having the most clear thoughts that day. So I feel like I didn't say my points well, but I don't even have a points. It's more of just reactions and gut feelings. But it does seem like you're kind of speaking out of both sides of your mouth, Lance, in the sense that it's like, look at all this growth for the Orthodox. We've doubled in size. Now there's two families instead of one going to this small little Orthodox church in the middle of nowhere, but then at the same, it's like, what do we measure success by? And if the measure of success is what I hear the orthos talking about, which is theosis, or like this life that is hidden in Christ, or, that is Christ-like, that's the point, is our, I want to take it back to the personal relationship. And I do think that heaven rejoices when one sinner repents. But I don't think that we can say that, like, it's not as simple as the reason why the mega churches are failing are the reasons why the orthos are growing, because even if they were the exact same people, the numbers are still way off. You know, like even if every new convert to orthodoxy was from a megachurch, then that still wouldn't be necessarily like we wouldn't be able to kind of, you know, it's the spirit that moves. And so I feel like we have all of these ecclesiologically minded folks around here who want to say, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What can we do better? Like, that is the very Protestant move for sure.
They're not ecclesiastically minded, though. Sorry to cut you off. They're not. They're distrustful of largely what I've seen is the guys that are converting are distrustful of institutionalized elements, which is kind of ironic because orthodoxy is you know, very, very institutionalized, top down heavy, and you know, you have these guys who say, you know, pretty outrageous things about ecumenical patriarchate. Oh, this is a puppet of the State Department, whatever. It doesn't, or even, you know, anyone talking bad about any bishop. It's funny that these guys that are converting they're really coming at it from a Protestant angle where it's like, oh, this is just the right confession of faith. This is the right way to do worship, etc. What I think Lance would maybe agree with is that with these mega churches, they're probably more in line with orthodoxy because they're seeking, they genuinely are seeking and obtaining, I think, in their own world, some sort of transcendental mystical experience at these mega churches with the bands and the lights, and you know, there is something going on there that's working for them, and it's much more scalable than the Orthodox model right now, because how many of the converts that are coming are going to learn how to chant? How many are going to learn the services? It's pretty damn tough to learn that stuff.
But I think that's so with Mo. I think that's the point, right? So when I was in finishing up my Old Testament stuff, we did it in Israel, and I was given the time when I would speak. We're going to be in Capernaum, so I chose when Jesus came back. You know, after he fed them the loaves and the fishes, and then he goes across the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum, and then they were following him and like, dude, give us that bread, and he's like, nah, whatever. He goes, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, and they're like, we just wanted some bread, dude. And he's like, no. So then he goes back, and then the other disciples, which are more than the 12, right? And they were kind of hoping Jesus would back off on that a little bit. And then he'd say, no, like, I mean this, like, let you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you know, that sort of deal. And then more left, right? So what I preached on at that point, when I had my chance to teach there with my 12 other seminary students and my seminary leader was, that if we're just trying to teach to put butts in the seats and grow, it certainly didn't seem to be what Jesus was about, right? And so further on in this video, what he talks about, if you would get to it, let me share this, because I think here's what my friends who were mega church pastors that have now left, right? And so though my leader was the founder of the mega church and left to do this house church planning movement. I think that someone like Francis Chan, who was preaching fervently before he left Simi Valley, was this: the key is to make disciples, right? What every big megachurch pastor, what a lot of them, that my friends would say is, I want people to go deeper into the life, and I want to get them to live the Christian life, and that goes down into discipleship and so on and so forth. So, you know, that's the key. And I'm going to share this. I think this was really good because Father Damick wasn't doing a rah-rah for orthodoxy in this video. If you watch it, like,
right. Yes. Right.
Yeah, he totally wasn't. This was not a rah-rah for orthodoxy, which I really like, because this is again the conversation I don't want to have. So he's asking about whether people were coming here for ideological reasons or whatever. But I think this is, Mo, what you're talking about in terms of, he's not bragging about the surge, and he was talking about Orthodoxy's response, but I think this is the response of what a megachurch pastor who's left would say. This is what they're hoping that the model would do, is this.
Because that's not what the church is about. The church is about making Christians, about making Orthodox Christians, making good ones, like the real deal, firmly planted, fully traditional, fully faithful to all of the teachings of the Orthodox Church, all of the teachings of the Holy Scriptures, of the Holy Fathers, of the divine services, the canons, all of that stuff, right? It's about training people to become people who love their neighbor with active love, people who sacrifice themselves, people who are serious about prayer, people who engage in almsgiving, people who engage in fasting, people who engage in regular worship, like all of these things that is the normal parishioner, not the average parishioner, unfortunately, but the normal parishioner. This is what their life looks like.
That's it.
Yeah, and he's totally right. He's right, but you're. I don't think you're going to realistically achieve much without locality, and a lot of these converts being very Protestant minded in the sense I have achieved the right confession of faith, and now it's that's where a lot will hone in on corrective statement of belief, correct form, and what's there. These guys don't have the reality of I'm bringing a family of 3 an hour away to church or something. I sound like a broken record here talking about driving to church far away, but it's just my reality, so I can speak to it. But you're not going to get normal parishioners when you're just having this sampling selection of here's a very broad distance of people coming to my small little church here. We have 6 new catechumens or whatever, and they're all men, and they're all really hyper focused on correct teaching, correct form. I just don't think there's going to be a pathway here.
Which is really it. So this is really interesting to tease out, Joseph, because I've been very blessed. I was in Kansas City first, and so I had lots of churches to choose from that were very close to me, right? My experience also has been I would say, let's just say and by the way, I've also seen families and not just young men. So that's not my experience. Yeah. That's just been limited.
No, I've seen young families too. Yep.
Okay. So our priest was very big on I don't know if I'd watch YouTube, and I don't know if the academic stuff. His big thing was trying to first start with the 5-minute prayer rule, try and ease your way into fasting, right? He's trying to get you to live the life, right? And then attend a bunch of services, which is what Father Damick's talking about. Get in here, because the services are powerful, even though you don't know it. But what you pointed out, which is the same thing I've talked to Paul about, which is the Orthodox Church is not prepared to handle this massive influx, right? And part of it is there aren't enough Orthodox parishes in enough localities, because again, if you're an hour and a half away, think Holy Week. Holy Week, you basically you need to go get an Airbnb for your family.
That's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah.
See, the thing is, you just need to pray towards Russia every day. And then you make your trip to Constantinople once a year.
If you're praying towards Russia, you want Constantinople to be destroyed.
And that's a funny, snarky comment. But that stuff doesn't exist. That stuff doesn't exist in the parishes we go to, McMo.
So right. So the two things. So man, I feel like Martin Luther. Maybe I need to mail off my theses, but because there's not an Orthodox church around me. But actually, there is. So I think there's one close by. But the two things that keep popping up into my mind is I disagree. I don't agree with our kindly bearded fellow over there. I don't think that's what the church is for. I'm not sure what the church is for, but it sounds like he's conflating discipleship with the church. And then, so the question is, it was when you say something like the Orthodox Church is not prepared for something, it's in one sense, I want to say of course they're not prepared. But then on the other sense,
McCall, stop. Jesus' Great Commission. And what did he really say? He said, go and make disciples of all nations and teach them to live by my commandments. Look at what the apostles did in Acts. They lived with people and taught them the life. One of the things I think even I've known as a Protestant forever, why do you see missions? No, mission statements are disciples making disciples making disciples. You'll see that in a lot because the point is to call people into the way of life and to disciple them and mentor them into the life, to live the life. Jesus didn't write, he said, come follow me, right? So
Right.
I will push back against that I think and I also
But
think
that,
what
but
the primary reason for the church services that you go to are about worshiping Christ, right? And then you have all this fundamental time to do all these other things with the other hours of the week.
Well,
sure,
what,
sure.
what, does
Like,
what does McMo think? Okay, you say you don't know what the church is for.
well, right.
I guess let me tease something out. Is the church
Okay.
for social improvement? Is it just community building? What if the church isn't for formation? If the church isn't the womb in which the Christian is fully fledged out and born in, what is the church for?
Yeah. If the world is, if the church isn't everything, then it's nothing. But like, I do, like, I can get down with all of those things, but I'm just trying to point to the fact that when we say the church, we all mean slightly different things. It's like we need the, you go to the church of your own understanding almost. But like the question that keeps popping up, which is the second part of it, is just like the who.
I agree with that. McMo, I agree with that.
Right. And so, like, yes, the church is the body of Christ. Does that body also mean that the church is Mary? Is the church the womb in which Christ is born? Is the church the divine liturgy? Like, because, when you say go to church, when you go to an Orthodox church, what that means is you're going to observe the divine liturgy. Now, being a part of a church, if you're a part of that, you can't be a part of that church if you live a 2-hour drive away. Like, you might be still part of the church, but I hope
Right.
that the Orthodox, well, I know that the Orthodox view is that the Orthodox Church is the church, and I know that every denomination to some extent has to believe that. But like,
yeah, that's the thing. Every denomination makes that claim,
right,
whether they
right,
want to admit it or not. They do. Yeah.
yeah, and so that's why from not be involved with the community except for TLC and to not go to any Sunday service. Well, that's the thing. It's the bride and the body. The two bodies become one body. That's what consummation means. But like, so that's why it's like tricky, when we're talking about the church and you two ortho friends, I'll call you, not ortho bros, ortho friends.
I'm
like,
an ortho Joe.
But the question that keeps popping up is like, who provides the increase? Like the same, I would assume that the same Holy Spirit that provides the increase to the mega church, and I've got one more point after this, but the same Spirit that provides the increase in the mega church provides the increase at the ortho church. But the other thing that's happening is like, we don't know why we do things. So the mega church, as being a part of a mega church, we weren't sure what made people keep coming back and what made more people come and stay. And we knew that part of it was just having a charismatic speaker. We knew that part of it was having music, like quality music that people were already listening to. We knew that part of it was
two most important things. If you want to grow right now in certain contexts, that's the two most important things. Yes.
But yeah, again,
rockstar
grow.
preacher and a great worship band. Yeah.
We when we say grow there, we mean grow qualitatively. But then there's also to have a great preacher and to have a great Sunday service where you can have that mystical experience of self-abandonment in worship. That's something that helps a true and a strong believer or a normative member, a normal member. Like, those are added bonuses when the individual is living a life that serves Christ. And so I think that we get in these, like, the one thing that will, without a doubt and with no complication, make the Church of Christ grow is if I am loving the Lord with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving my neighbor as myself. And so it seems like all of this other stuff is kind of like a complication. And I know, like, it's easy for me to say because I'm not in a church. I don't have to worry about paying a pastor's salary, yada, yada, yada. But like, if the individuals do not have the committed personal relationship with Christ, then all you have is Christendom.
McMo, okay, when you say love God and love your neighbor, like, that's, of course, that's right. And it's, but it's like saying, dude, like, just be a kung fu master and do a roundhouse kick to someone's face. Like, how are, we're embodied creatures. How do you, how do you just do that? You need a discipline. This is, I use the pipe fitter example. A pipe fitter is a really straightforward occupation. Okay, you're gonna contribute to plumbing. But you're not just gonna get the pipe fitter manual and go become a master pipe fitter.
Well, yeah, because you don't have the spirit of pipe fitting, who's in your heart witnessing with your conscience. You also don't have the community of the universal pipe fitters, the Freemasons, if you will, to like I think that, like, obviously this is the great kind of Protestant sainthood of all, or priesthood of all believers idea. But I just, I see so many Protestants for so many reasons, because, like, this is all action, is we do something and then we justify our actions later. And so what I see happening is the Lord calling a lot of people into orthodoxy, those people getting to orthodoxy, and when people ask them why they did it, giving really, really bad answers. Like, it's like,
Yeah, and then they usually leave after a few years.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
no, and I think, see, one of the phenomenon. So I think one of the phenomenon that I think, and that's why I shared even this Zootown church like this. I've been fascinated, and there's more churches that are doing this. That was just one example of these evangelical churches finding their kind of way to orthodoxy. And one of the things that I talk to, particularly people who are newer or whatever, is like, if you're not like, if you don't want to come here to kind of build a prayer roll, pray the Jesus prayer, attend the services, fast, do the thing. Do the things, like live the life. Like, don't come here. Like and you will hear a lot of Orthodox priests will tell you that exact same thing. Like, a lot of times they'll try and challenge you to see whether or not you're really like that. And so those are like practices, like practical things, transformational things to build the life, right? And if you aren't coming to do that, like if you aren't coming to actually practice it, it makes no sense to join it. But I also want to take this out larger, because again, I think what's kicking this up is, and I'm not telling people, if your family is thriving in a mega church, but by all means, please stay there. Like, I mean, if you're thriving and you're in your roots and you're being transformed where you're at, my gosh, why would you leave that? I'm not saying that, but there's this thing is happening, which is very interesting, and it goes against anything you would look at church growth. What you would see, what would have attracted people, is there's been a fundamental shift that's happening in what I would call, like Father Stephen Damick pointed out, Anglicanism. Like, this isn't even Ortho versus Protestant. Like, I think there's this move back into more traditional
Missouri
services,
Synod Lutheranism is seeing the same thing, by the way. Sorry, Lance, just saying, like, it's a universal movement that I've seen too. Yeah.
And they're traditional, like, and what they're starting to weirdly find out is that there's, even in there, is that actually when they've gone to embracing more of the traditional, they're actually seeing more of an attraction coming that way. Like, there's been which is really interesting. I think with Mo, we can just talk about this, which is because this isn't a fight about whatever. And I know this angers people, but I'm going to make the claims. I think the time of the seeker relevance church is over. Of course, people are going to continue to do that for some period of time, but for 50 years from now, I don't think we'll be doing that. If this is what you're living in now, this is your lifetime. I'm not saying anything about that. But it's amazing that we've seen this, and I think it's around meaning crisis. I think it's about a lot of the stuff we're seeing, and it goes against everything church planners and church builders have thought about for the past 40 years. Is, wait a minute, a move towards traditionality is going to be the move that's going to attract people. And I don't even have to build all these programs and outreaches. Like, people are going to show up if I start doing things in a traditional way. That's a fascinating development.
Right. I mean, like, so I think I would put that maybe in different terms. I don't think that it's a return to, order, from the chaos of seeker group. I think that it really, if I would hope that this is rather a redefinition of what it looks like for a church to grow. What does it look like to build a church? Because that kind of goes back to my, the snarky comment that made me jump in, which is that, like, it's so easy to say more people at church good, less people at church bad. When, like, that Copernicum story and most of the, there's a way in which you could say the actual parables that Jesus preaches were meant to send as many people away as they were to bring them in. And so I just think that, like, it's a fool's errand.
Either or. See, you're putting a binary on it, because I think it's a nuanced question. So again, when I look at that, not necessarily some of the people that have the biggest crowds right now on Sundays, and I've been feeling this way for a long time, and I understand why they have that crowd, ooh, I certainly wouldn't want my kids going there, and I wouldn't attend there. So butts in the seats don't necessarily say that. At the same time, there is the attraction and bringing in new people. So it's a both and. It's
Are
an
you
either
saying
or. And
it depends on the butts? It depends on the individual
uh,
butts.
I don't think it depends on the individual butts. I think it depends on the leaders and what's going on in that church, right? I think what's the message and what are they doing. I think that's probably the kind of most important thing. But I think you're right. Like, it's not an either or. Like, it's because of the Pentecost, right? They numbered all those people who came to the Lord that day and were baptized. Like, we're not against bringing in new Christians. At the same time, we live in the paradox of drawing the crowd. Also, isn't it either? Like, Jesus called us to a very, like, it's like, pick up your cross. It's not the call to the life is a difficult call.
Well, right, that's a paradox because the kind of the caveat you said was, if your family is thriving at a megachurch, keep going to the megachurch. And I almost want to say something that's, I'm not trying to hold on to the proposition so much as the feeling here, but it's like, unless your family is adding to the suffering of Christ at your local church, you're not a part of the church. Like, the thriving is not the because of course, what do you mean by thriving? But like, yes, there are a lot of upper middle class families living very comfortably at churches all over America. And, like, I think that the kind of American, more people, or you could just call it like the crowd, the herd. There's a lot of herding going on instead of a lot of pastoring, I guess you could say. And
well, and like Philip Yancey's book, like, I mean, a lot of I've read all those, a lot of those fantasy.
the trellis and the vine.
The crowd, yeah, where you were using the crowd.
I hate that book.
Yeah, exactly. But that kind of language is there. I mean, it's to some extent trying to kind of trying to figure that out. And again, thriving doesn't mean success or even health or those sorts of things. Thriving is to be able to withstand the storms of life, like having a peace that goes beyond understanding, right? So developing that life that you can see even in 12-step groups, like there's no promise. Like, by the way, life doesn't get better when you start living a spiritual life. Like, life happens, and some people can lead pretty painful and difficult lives. The question is do you have a strength and something you can lean on that can help you withstand that? To me, that's what I would call thriving, spiritual thriving.
Yeah. Some megachurch is gonna figure this out and find videos of people dying alone during COVID and say, want this to happen? If not, come join us. Like, that's the type of like marketing I feel like. But all that to say too, like, I'm a radical universalist. So I think that everyone is predestined to heaven, and so I'm kind of like,
only universalists will be saved, right, McMo?
Exactly. Only the universalist shall be saved, in this life and the next. But like, so I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade, and I also think that the Lord works in mysterious ways. It's like, for not everyone seems to have as heavy of a cross, but everyone's got their cross. So like, I don't know. I feel like when we get excited about quote unquote church growth, when we get excited about new converts, or the inverse of Joseph kind of being the forgive me, Joseph, I know this isn't exactly what's going on.
That's my caricature, but it's fine.
Right. LARPing as LARPing as the older brother, being like, no, there's all these problems. Since you took half of the you've taken half of the riches of Christ and squandered them in your Protestant pigsties, and you want to come back and make the home more like the pigsty. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. And we've also got all of these issues about running the farm on half the capital. So like, I think both of those things are kind of like, you suffer in the church, you suffer out of the church. You suffer, like, you grow with the church, you shrink with the church. Like, all of that stuff to me seems like it may be too much for me to kind of hold. And because I don't have any personal responsibilities to a church body right now, they almost seem like distractions away from my personal prayer life and my trying to love my neighbor, like you were saying. And yes, to your point earlier, Joseph, like I would not be able to do any of this like out in the wilderness if I hadn't grown up in a church, in a small Protestant fundamentalist Southern Baptist church that had its own thoughts of like, yes, we're doing it right, we're going back to the original. Now, one could argue that they were dumb and they didn't know what the original actually was. They hadn't read the church fathers. You know, it's good for Paul and Silas, meant it was good for Billy Graham. And like, so yeah, every church has problems. Every church has failings. Some churches experience growth, and the Lord uses that growth to feed the widows and the orphans, and also worship Him in spirit and in truth. And then some churches are like PVK, who's like, can you imagine a more charismatic pastor than PVK? I mean, he's trapped all of us in his gazer beams, but like his church is dying. And ask Paul why his church is dying. Demographics, but the answer is the Lord saw in His infinite wisdom and divine, what's the reformed word? Sovereignty, that living stones would shrink in size and in vibrancy until PVK started an online ministry. And so like we just don't know what's going to happen. And
well, we know this for sure. PVK's church will grow as soon as his liturgics are pretty.
Right. Yeah. Paint the walls blue, add some gold, no more Freddie freestyles, a little more chance, please. And yeah, he'll experience huge growth. But I think that that's part of this space, right? Is you have all these people who are in these church bodies and who are living and loving one another in those bodies. And then you've got people on the outskirts, the heretics, those of us wandering in the wilderness. And you could debate whether we're like Jesus in the desert or whether we're like the younger brother in the pigsty. Sometimes it feels a little bit like both. But I do think that like from a completely, I don't have a horse in the race other than just my personal conviction and my personal relationship with Christ. Like it does seem to, I don't know. Am I peeing on the campfire to be like, let's wait and see,
No.
like this growth, like
this is No, that's why I wanted you to come in with Mo. Listen, I'm not, and again, I'm talking about one of the things that I think I guess it's just this articulated something that I've seen happening, right? So I've seen it happening for 4 years. It also, and we're all a party of one, right? So I've been on this journey for 12 to 15 years, seeing this thing and being a part of people seeing this thing and trying to answer it. And one of the things, and so Mark, he might be thinking about this comment, whatever, which is why can't any small group of Christians adopt Orthodox practice and start a house church? Absolutely, they can.
Okay.
No. They can't.
We didn't talk about this.
No,
this
we'll
is
do this.
Beyond McMo's territory, though. So
right. No. So here's the deal. So I would say, people pursuing Christ in whatever manner earnestly that helps them and their families connect. And God is everywhere present, filling all things, right? So I think that's a good thing. And I say that. But if you would ask me individually, why am I not doing that? I can only speak for myself. It became very clear to me that the church already had all the things. And what would I be doing trying to recreate this thing? Also, the biggest issue I had was around Eucharist, like the care with which both the matins and the divine liturgy that the priests take with respect to the Eucharist and the mystical supper are something that I would never feel good trying to replicate in my home because whatever. So personally myself, I decided, why try to recreate something when it's all there? The depth, the prayer rules, the services, the lectionaries, the depth of wisdom I can tap into, all the daily practices. Like, that's why I'm not going to do it. But there are people who are doing this, and much like McMo, like from my perspective, I mean, there are people in 12-step groups that are finding a God of their understanding and all this other sort of stuff. Like, I don't like that stuff, falls all there. But I want to delete all that to say that is, I also believe fully in I believe fully in the Orthodox Church and everything it stands for, and will and submit to that, and am happy to, and think that I'm joining the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. both and.
Yeah, but to be a bit more practical, Mark, the reason why you can't just have a small group of Christians adopt Orthodox practice and start a house church is, well, it depends what you'd mean. Jordan Peterson mode here, I guess. It depends what you mean by Orthodox practice. If you are going trying to replicate a simple orthro service, that's Orthodox corporal prayer practice. You're first things first, nothing happens in the Orthodox Church without the bishop being involved. That's just the reality at it at this point. And so it's like, well, is that how things were done in the 200s? I don't know. It's how things are being done in the 2000s. So there's a lot of practicality barriers to entry on that field. And if you want to go your own route and do it, that means you're going to be operating outside of this institution, and that's effectively schism. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic or mean or something, but it's literally like, if you want to operate in that entrepreneurial sense of, I'm just going to start a house church, I'm going to grab whatever Orthodox practice I can manage, it's going to be like black market orthodoxy, and it's or orthodoxy smuggling, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, so I saw the comment from Tayo wanting me to fight back. I don't need the temptation, because I am feeling a slight pull to go scorched earth on the whole high church thing. But you know what? I'll just say it. It's a joke. It's snarky. Forgive me. I don't mean to offend. But it's like, I do get the sense sometimes with the Eucharist talk, as soon as someone says Eucharist rather than communion, I just think, okay, I'm now in the role of different older brother than the prodigal son, but the stronger or weaker brother, I guess. And it, if to put it bluntly, or to put it as harshly as possible.
Well, why are you okay with saying Jesus then? Because that's a transliterated Greek word.
Well, yeah, I don't really care about the actual words. It's more about why someone might use the word Eucharist over the word communion for reasons. But what I was going to say was, to me, it's like, if you feel like you need someone with a long beard who knows a foreign language to turn the body, or to turn the bread and the wine into the body and the blood, then you've missed the point completely. It's Christ who says, this is my body and this is my blood. And so, yes, there's arguments to be had. And to be honest, too, I feel quite conflicted on this, because I have not given myself a road communion, and I feel a little butthurt that the Catholics won't let me take theirs. And so, but like, to put it bluntly, it's just kind of like, it's was liturgy made for man, or man made for liturgy? And I think that kind of gets down to it. But yeah, I'm not going to be the one who's like down with the Eucharist, down with communion. I realize that is that was the harsh thing I was going to say, was like, is it food offered to the idol of high church?
Come on and get down with the Eucharist. So one thing I would push back a little, McMo, I haven't listened to the whole thing, is this is what Nate said in his conversation with Brandon Graham Dempsey, which is perfect. And I don't know how this fits with Orthodox theology, so Lord have mercy. But there's an ability to think of the Logos as disincarnate. And I actually think that's bad theology. So where Christ is, there's a body. There's instantiation, and there's a historic hierarchical instantiation, because that's the way the universe plays itself out.
Totally. That's the pipe fitter needs a mentor. That's not just the book, like McMo. It's like, I think you have these ideas that are floating up here, and there's no incarnation going on, and Christianity is an incarnational religion, and this is the easiest way to take all that what I just said and not make it thinky talky is, how does this get passed on to passed down a generation? And when it's just thinky talky idea stuff, and it's not incorporated dojo like mode, it's just gonna
Yeah, but you're not passing it down generation to generation of Christian. You're passing it down generation to generation of priest.
No, not really.
That's not it. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
That's not right.
that's. I think you're grasping on something, and you got to turn on the light, man.
Thinker. I'm a sloppy thinker, and I'm also an absurdist. So forgive me.
He's also God's silliest goose.
Yeah, I'm further on the Luke Thompson scale than Luke Thompson is.
The priest starting the congregation. Also, I wanted to just say, so Joseph, I wanted to, since I have you in
your
right here,
running after me here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't understand all the hate you've been getting. I think it's kind of ridiculous. I don't understand it at all.
I'm totally fine with it. I'm not scared.
What's going on? Joseph's receiving hate? What?
Because you are Orthodox, correct?
Yes, I am.
So here's the thing.
I don't think I have a family and stuff, and I'm just like this. I literally have 3 kids under 4.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm in my last year of the Holy Cross Diaconate program. I've been around for a minute. Like I'm not talking out of my butt here. I wouldn't be talking about these things if I wasn't, confident in the reality of it.
I mean, all I would want to say in defense of you a little bit is that, I mean, is it anti-Orthodox or anti-whatever just to point out issues and complications? I mean, good grief. People are so tribalist, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's really like, well, if you think Orthodoxy is a cool thing, worthwhile thing, we should try to be realistic about challenges to overcome them.
Sure.
So that it can thrive. And a lot of people are just like, oh, we're on the cusp of this religious revolution. Orthodoxy is going to imperialistically conquer every other, spirit and course of thinking, where some
hopefully not
in North Dakota is going to be like, oh, the Orthodox were right all along. It's like, this is a fantasy. Yeah, this is not
Joseph, and I want to flesh this out a little bit, because in real life parishes, meeting real people who actually come in and do this, and this is, let's just say for me, the count is up to over 50 over the past 4 years of just people I've come to know. Like, I've only met 2 young guys who came in all hyped up about that stuff. And by the way, the priest took care of that in his own order over the first year and a half of them being.
Yeah, God bless our priests.
Yeah. So, but I think this is coming from a real place. I mean, like, when I look at internet arguments on anything, whether they political or whatever, I discount a lot of that, because that's, you know what I mean? Like, when I meet people, like my neighbors, we can talk some way on Facebook or whatever about political things, but then we're helping each other out in our yards and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's this weird thing that the internet does. But I'm curious, are you really running? But I also want to admit, like, the biggest problem, and I say this right now, the Orthodox doesn't have enough churches. Like, there are people that would want to go and they're 2 hours away, and going 2 hours away, if you're really committed to it, that's fine. Like, if that's what, whatever, or you can be like Sherry out in the woods and just do it like a modern day St. Andrew or something. But it's a problem. Like, you need to be able to go to church, like where your family can go quickly in your locale, and they don't have it.
It's just a real life practicality issue when kids get involved. But and that's not even to speak of the insanity of there's like one standard deviation on the bell curve of Orthodox spirituality where somebody can be okay to be isolated. Like, that's a very difficult thing to do. It's very difficult to be a Christian isolated, because you need other people. You need to take on other people's suffering. You need to love other people. You need to deal with difficult people to grow in the faith. And I think the thing that Luke gets right is, there's, especially in Orthodoxy, there's this idea, and in Catholicism too, with the institution is guiltless or something. And it's like, I don't see the solution is, the institution just needs a little bit more money and resource, and then we can linearly grow church presence, so that instead of driving an hour and a half, you're driving 45 minutes. And I don't see that as that I don't see that as a solution per
Well,
se.
but I
How
also
did?
that's
Oh
why
yeah.
that's why I want to take this. I want to take this thing that I started out with, even above orthodoxy, and what Father Stephen Damick has pointed to, which is like probably when I look at like John or Nick or others in our community, they started going to Anglican, right? Like, because you probably have a better chance of having an Anglican church closer to you. And so again, I think again the thing that I point to, which is this, it's really interesting. We're starting to see this shift, and what I liked about Father Damick's YouTube video where he started to talk about this is there's this real thing that's happening. They had no evangelistic outreach. They didn't build programs for people in anything, and all of a sudden they're seeing this surge. And he's also pointing out to other more traditional types of services. That is a fundamental shift from churches that have really happened since the 60s, I think Vatican II, but truly since the Jesus movement hit, that if you were a church planner, you wouldn't think that embracing traditional sorts of things would be anywhere attractive to people. Yet, and this is again, it's not just orthodoxy. That is an amazing fundamental shift that's happened.
Sure, yeah, but all I was just going to wrap up and say is where Christian, it feels like something's been lost in some sense, where it's like you could be a Christian in the 200s, and it didn't matter if you were in southern France or northern Anatolia, and you're being persecuted, and you didn't have a beautiful church. Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. Probably didn't. There was something that you could maintain in all of that. Where it is now, after how almost 2 millennia of imperial backing and patronage, and the whole structure of you look at how Christianity grew, and you compare it to like something like Islam. Why did Central Asia become predominantly Muslim? Well, Islam is kind of a low infrastructure religion in that sense, where you don't need candles in Islam. You don't, and I mean, you don't need candles to be a Christian either. But it's about how the life is lived in Christian communal worship and whatnot. And what I'm trying to get at is we have this model of the last 1700 years of how churches are planted and grow and facilitate. And how would you have been a Christian in the Oregon Trail? You would have an easy time being a Muslim in the Oregon Trail. You just need to, prostrate and at the hours and whatnot. But the question of infrastructure is critical to this, and with scaling and all that. But
yeah, I want to hear what Mark has to say too. And looks like we scared off Ron, but so I guess I think I know that you can and could have been a Christian on the Oregon Trail, like fairly simply. But the institutional thing, and this is why I there's a part of me that feels like, Christ has called some to build institutions, and those institutions serve for the good of the world, certainly in some aspects. But the thing that keeps ringing in my ears, which I think is like my perspective on the whole thing, is what Christ says before he says, therefore, go on to all the nations, teaching and the et cetera, Great Commission. Doesn't he say right before that, and I don't remember the exact phrasing, but something like, all of heaven has been put under my feet, or something like that? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Does anybody who's a better Christian than me remember the exact words, or can look it up?
All authority in heaven and earth has been given unto me. Go out and make this. You're talking to the longer ending of Mark there.
Right. And so I oftentimes hear both Orthodox, Catholic, anybody who stands very firmly on that, like our tradition is right and best, which again, noted, you have to do that to some extent. But everybody who makes that claim, to me, sounds like they're taking the words of Jesus and saying, all authority has been given to me. All authority has been given to Orthodoxy. All authority has been given to the Seeker movement. And I just think that it never was. If the Seeker movement wasn't meant to exist, it never would have existed. If orthodoxy wasn't meant to exist, orthodoxy would never meant to existed. I think that the exact amount of people that need to become orthodox right now are becoming orthodox, and I think the exact right amount of people who are in a megachurch are in a megachurch right now, on this day, right now in this moment. Like now, tomorrow, that number may be different, but I also think that tomorrow that number will be exactly the number that the Lord intended. And so that gets to some of like why I get uneasy with even kind of what you're doing, Joseph, of like throwing up the problems, which I'm normally like stoked for because that's mostly all we have in this life. But I just think that in some ways it does, for people who are more anxious, it may give them it doesn't make if I was trying to go back to church, it doesn't make the decision easier, because I just see a bunch of people saying, we're the true church, we're the true church, we're the true church. And I'm trying to say, no, I have Christ in me. Like, let me serve you. But I can't if you're going to.
I think there's just real quick. I think you're kind of making some general statements here. First things first, Roman Catholicism, they say, yeah, we are the visible Church of Christ, but they don't say Lutherans aren't Christians, and they say, Orthodox have valid sacraments, Coptic Christians have valid sacraments,
but they won't let us take
I think
Eucharist.
you're making some broad strokes here, and same in Orthodoxy. We don't say we're Orthodox to the detriment of Roman Catholics. Roman Catholics aren't Christians. I mean, you can read the Ecumenical Patriarch's Social Ethos document to understand more. But
right, but we can't take the Eucharist together, right?
Well,
right. So McMullen, you were making the perfect Protestant arguments, right? Which is
I don't know about the perfect Protestant arguments. Definitely not perfect Protestant.
Perfect. The right word. But you're making the whole case for the non-institutional, invisible Protestant church.
Well, and I want to. It's a more radical case than that, I think, because I want to uphold the extreme sovereignty of God in every individual's life, and so that the long bearded fellows in the dark robes, I trust that the Lord is speaking with them and guiding them in the steps that lead to life. And the same as I trust that the Lord is doing the same thing for my homeless neighbor, even though it's really hard to believe that that's the life that God intended for them. That's kind of, that's where I'm trying to go. That's where I see my ramblings failing. But I do hear the critique, Joseph, that I'm talking in generalities, but I think that we're talking in generalities. And what I would prefer to do is talk about the individual and, how the Lord has spoken to you in the Orthodox Church, and how, God's spoken to me in the wilderness. And I think that like the quote unquote church talk is just a level above what I feel comfortable with as a limited human, and as someone who's not a part of the structure or the hierarchy. It's really hard for me to believe that that hierarchy is Dio, yeah. Only the universalist shall. I should have just got on, said that, and just dropped off. Only the universalist shall be saved.
Okay, can I just interject? We are on the Oregon Trail, in the sense that just the fact that we're in an in-between time. We're in chaos. We're in that period of Judges where every man does what's right in his own eyes because there is no king. Now, in faith, we have a king, but we sure as hell don't act like it. And that was kind of my point in my comments to Luke's live stream this morning, is that a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand, and we are not standing.
Oh, certainly in the Orthodox world, that's the case.
The Orthodox Church in the East, or the Byzantine Empire, let's just think of it about the empire. The empire collapsed under pressure from Islam and lost a great deal of the territory to Islam, because the church was divided within itself, within the empire. A vast number of Christians had been generationally persecuted, to the point that when Islam came, they flocked, they turned, and saw the Arab invasion as a liberation from Christians. I'm speaking of the Nestorians particularly. Okay.
Well, yeah, so, and it doesn't help that the emperor, we have an iconoclast emperor now. We're iconoclast. We have an Orthodox emperor. We're Orthodox now.
That's internal division.
Yeah, but
now,
Mark,
that's a separate thing.
What you're painting right now the fact that, wow, church history is really bloody and messy. There's a lot of people coming into Orthodoxy thinking, like, they look at the Byzantine Empire like the Dunmer in the Elder Scrolls. They think that the Byzantine Empire was this advanced technological marvel that somehow was betrayed by the Latins and the Muslims. And, you know,
I'm gonna push back. I'm gonna push back on you with the a lot of, like, even watching Father Damek's video or whatever. Like, I know there's this. I think that's a very small minority, Joseph. And I would just say, but again, this is my bent. This is my bent, and this goes back to what McMo was talking about. Is, for me, my journey into Orthodoxy is entirely personal. It's about the prayer rule, the Jesus prayer, the fasting, the participating in the services, and it's living the life. Like, this whole, like, I don't even, like, I'll just tell you, like, at the parishes I've been at, we've never talked about Constantinople or Byzantine empires.
Because you're talking to normal people.
Yeah. So like, I would just say, like, the real lived experience is much more personal. Yeah.
So solve that problem. Your problem of locality, your problem of how do you scale this interest in Orthodoxy into actual sustained growth, say over many decades.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and I think the way. Let me finish my thought. Let me finish my thought.
Yep.
You do that by small, just as those early Christians did.
Yeah.
They hear a little bit. They may only have slivers of or fractions of what we have in terms of Scripture or knowledge of Scripture, and they start to run with it in faith. So they form faith communities, and then they build those faith communities around the practices that they have an understanding of, around the teachings they have an understanding of, and then over time, they either send out students to go study under disciples of the apostles, or go to places of learning, or as it evolved. And I think you could have unauthorized Orthodox congregations grow ad hoc, independent of anybody giving them the official okie dokie, but then over time, through development and some initiative, some self-sacrifice, some concentrated, and the internet, of course, is going to accelerate all this. It makes it much easier. But then, in time, then build congregations that the Orthodox churches could adopt. That the various. I'm not good on your knowledge of how you're going to run your ecclesia.
Quick question for that. Then, are you describing a small group? You're describing Orthodoxy without clergy.
Initially. And why not? I know it sounds crazy, but you didn't have clergy in 200 in many cases. So you build it until you get it. Huh?
So, Mark, in some ways, that's what happens with missions, right? So if they don't have a priest, but let's say they want to start a mission, they get a blessing, and they'll do reader services and things like that, and a priest might come eventually, and it allows people to start to come together in a locality, and as that grows, then ultimately, you could have.
But have the locality. You can't have people driving 100 miles. You're not going to build it. You're not going to grow a movement. And what's going to happen is the people who have to drive an hour to church every week are ultimately just going, because they have needs for their kids and their grandkids and everything, and need for community and all the other things that human people require. So they're just going to fall away, and they're going to get scooped up by others. They're going to get they're going to move into Anglicanism, or I don't care where they go. Well, I'm just saying that in terms of churches, but I'm just saying, if you really want to, I don't think that the problem of locality is as big as you think it is. If you just simply have the faith to just start building it, and then in time it will be brought in.
That's what happens. So people.
Hey, Luke unmuted a few minutes ago. I think he had a response for Mark on this, but
I gotta run, y'all. Get back to work. Bye.
See you, Joseph. Or McMo, I mean. So here, how about this for a controversial thought? Because all belief and true Christian discipleship is personal, and so therefore for each person, to get their kairos moment of whatever they need that is fundamentally universally particular to them, that's going to happen when it happens. It doesn't matter. All the other details don't matter because it's fundamentally about incarnation. Like the parable of the soils. I mean, there's going to be people that do this, people that do that, and fall away. But for a person to truly believe, it's got to be that moment. And so it's whatever the situation demands. I mean, like there's not a lot of parishes. Is that a problem? No, because it'll happen when it needs to happen. That's kind of to McMo's point. I'm not that worried about it. And what are we going to do? You're going to put up
I'm not worried about it either.
A McMansion church?
Yeah.
Well, that's not Orthodox. So, I mean,
but you can. I don't think it's necessary. When you say it's personal, I don't think it's that implies, from I think American point of view, that it's going to be individual. And I think that it's not necessarily individual. Yeah, it's personal within community, whether that's church or Sangha or synagogue.
I think when Luke says personal, it's, in Orthodoxy, everything is pastoral. Everything is, one priest is not going to work with a parishioner in the same cookie mold, cutout. Everything is the diversity of the human person is respected, in every case.
But to your point, Mark, that does work fractally, and it works culturally, and it works nationally, because those are all aspects of the different relationships that make up persons. So and that's going to be different everywhere. But it's not a problem, and because there are people in my parish, like I have a particular friend who's a deacon, grew up Protestant, became Catholic in high school, converted to Orthodoxy, went to seminary, didn't end up getting ordained, came back, tried to practice for a while, it was too tough, became Anglican, practiced Anglican for a while, but he just couldn't do it after a while. And he ended up back in Orthodoxy because it didn't work. And despite all its problems, and despite being a convert and everything else, he just ended up back there. But everybody's going to have their own journey, and I'm not, you can't manufacture that kairos moment. Like you can think you should be Orthodox, doesn't mean you're ready to be. You can think you should be all kinds of things.
Well, and I think, again, I'll make a very fair point. There is an absolute way for people to start. People in Sourdough Neil, they started an Orthodox mission in their town. Like you can start these missions and you start coming together in community right where you're at. It's small, and then over time, if it grows, you'll have a priest, and you'll ultimately grow into an Orthodox church. And priests will come and serve that mission and everything else. But it provides a place for you guys to get, so it's there. It is a very big challenge for Orthodoxy if they're. It's so even in like these big cities, like they're busting at the seams, they're having to build new projects. Father Damick talked about that, like they could do it. But I also know this, which is like, I mean, I don't know, they'd figure it out, but I don't think there's going to be a mass conversion of Protestants to Orthodoxy.
No.
It's not going to happen. But I think you're finding, like, so again, kind of to come back to this interesting thing, like I would be really curious to see. There's not net growth because a lot of people are leaving churches, even as some of these new people are coming in or whatever. I'd be curious to see what's happening in the more traditional Anglican church. I'd like to see those numbers. Like those things will start coming out. I'd like to see if you're seeing a lot more of a movement there, because I suspect there is.
I don't think when you talk about growth, Lance, I think you said since you've become Orthodox, you've met 50 people. Of 50 specific people who have done likewise? Is that what you said? Okay.
I met new people coming into, I went to a small Greek Orthodox church. Now, the Antiochian churches have had hundreds come in over the past 2 or 3 years.
Right. Okay. So just to give you some perspective. Right. Just to give you some perspective, I was around Calvary Chapel late 70s into the 80s. All right. And in here in Southern California, and I was at a satellite. All right. The satellites were seeing growth of 50 people or more per week, and that's sustained at a rate for probably, I would say, over a decade. So what they ended up doing is they grew, they broke off. More churches grew. They grew, and then the larger ones were growing sometimes by many more than that. My point being that when growth really happens and the timing is right, that's what we're seeing now, I think, is a precursor. And I actually think you're seeing it even in non-Orthodox churches. I'm going to all things in Church of Christ. I think I'm seeing some signs of real renewal, and it's as far from Orthodox as it gets. I mean, and now I don't know. I've not been in a charismatic church for quite a while, so I don't know what they're looking like. I know that they're reducing services and stuff. But I think what the meaning crisis is real in the sense that people are kind of dropping. They're just whatever happened with politics and the COVID and everything else have people just beat up and worn out, and they are looking for some spiritual renewal, and they're looking to the churches. And I think it's going to be widespread. I think everybody needs to be ready for growth. I want Orthodox, the Catholics, the Charismatics, Church of Christ, whoever, Baptists. I want us all to get our act together, get past all of these ridiculous controversies that we've caused ourselves with the scandals and whatnot. And it seems like we have some really earnest. I mean, I see so many beautiful, earnest people in the TLC, and they're in all camps.
Right. No,
and
I think what you're seeing though is like the Pew statistics, and what you're finding is and Father Damick mentioned this in the video. It's not net growth. Like a lot of people are leaving the church too. Because the biggest thing that happened at COVID was not people coming into the church, it was people leaving the church. When you look at the Pew statistics, nuns are going to start to far outweigh people who identify with any faith tradition if things continue on a certain track. And so, but yes, there are. But then there's the meaning. See, the one thing I think Father Damick didn't have his finger on is he was trying to figure out what they keep hearing over and over at clergy, and he just was looking in the Antiochian church because that's his brothers, where people keep saying something was missing. And it is this cultural moment, right? It's COVID, it's pandemic, it's all these things. There's a meaning crisis. And so what was missing, that's the meaning crisis. And so some people are finding their way in. And I think it's good. I think it's actually good for what I would call nominal Christians who are dissatisfied with whatever they're doing in their church to leave. Like, I think it's good, like the prodigal son, like, I think it's good to leave, to go out in the wilderness, to then return, right? Because you need to go out and experience that and allow whatever happens you out there.
Well,
it's the same thing.
We're at peak. I think we're probably at peak nuns, and we're already past it. And what we're going to see right now, and if you look at those university protests around Palestine and Gaza, I think you're going to see, this is why the churches have to have their act together, and they don't. Is a lot of those kids are going to jump into Islam, and some will stick, many won't, but it's going to create havoc in their lives and in their families, and in their societies, arguably, because some of those are going to be radicalized because Islam has a strong bent to self-radicalization.
Well, it's the thing,
particularly among converts in the West.
Like Local Distance had a tweet, and it's good. Actually, this isn't about. It's not about Israel. It's not about Palestine. It's not about all this other sort of stuff. It's just about revolution. They have whipped up a certain generation that are part of the revolution. And again, I think you're right. And I think, well, Europe's dealing with this. I mean, my children, and particularly my grandchildren, like what we're going to go back to is centuries ago, is this Muslim versus Christian thing is going to be a real deal thing.
Well, it's more than it's not so much. I know some beautiful Muslims, and I think, and I can have community with them, just like I have community with Hezi and Jews like him. Can I have community with Jews like Jacob? Jacob makes it more challenging. I don't know if I can sit in the same room peacefully with Jacob. I know I can with Hezi. So, but I know Christians I can't sit in the same room with. All right. So, I mean, we all have difficulties.
Well,
But-
Luke can't sit in the same room with you either. He's running.
but there is within Islam, and particularly Western Conference Islam, a great deal of extremism that's antisocial, and it. What I don't want to see, where the church needs to be, and it isn't in a position to do, is catch those kids that are going to convert into that. They're doing it right now on the campuses, and redirect their energies towards love, but instead they're going to go towards some form of legalism and extremism and violence. And
sort of
it's
Marxism or communism. I mean, that's where they're headed.
well, that's another direction. But I think that's a different direction, and it's going to be. I think Marxism is Western and modern, and people don't want it. The kids are turning towards something else. They're turning toward the 7th century, and that sucks.
Well, and the other thing that's happening right now is this upheaval we have. Is the internet's a brand new thing, but we have this whole social media attention monsters on these phones and everything else. Humanity's going through this crazy technological advance, and we're not handling this very well as human beings. And I think that's feeding a lot of the meaning crisis and other things that are happening. But at the same time, we're talking to everyone here on YouTube, an amazing platform, and finding ways to come together. So try and take the beast and defeat it from the inside. Yeah, I think there's this interesting cultural moment that's happening.
But I really want you guys to take your own church growth seriously. I mean, you guys in Orthodoxy have something to say to this generation. I want you to say it, and say it as loudly as you possibly can, in as many places you possibly can, and don't hinder yourself by your lack of imagination and initiative and faith. That's what was my point about breaking out and doing what you call missions, or just starting house churches and starting the practices where you are, and then build something where you're at, with an intention of ultimately being associated with something much bigger, so that you can be available for this generation. Because the nuns are done. But it's an unsustainable model. And people like PBK, God love him, he's got to stop calling his church a dying church. You're not a dying church when you got 7 new members in class. Stop it. You're growing.
Christianity does have I've had a lot of conversations with friends, well, both recorded and offline, about Christianity has a weird, I don't know, embracing defeatism kind of a attitude. I mean, so on one hand, there's this weird, whatever, Christian nationalist, imperialist, earthly power kind of mode, which is a lot of the American culture war crap, and lots of that stuff throughout history. But then there's this corollary to it, which is hyper pietism, death cult, we're losing, and that is all fine. I think that's in the Bible, it talks about sorrowful but always rejoicing, and I think but within that there's this weird tendency, and I have within myself. I think you're talking about it with Paul a little bit, of just I don't know, perhaps for whatever various reasons, too readily embracing a defeatist posture.
And Paul
Because
talked about that on one of his live streams recently. He was talking about, I'm glad the Orthodox are confident. We need to be, and this is what you were talking about, Mark, which is be confident. Paul, you be confident. Let's be confident Christians, right? Let's don't cower and this, that, the other. Let's have confidence. And that's what you were speaking to. And, in terms of that. And, I think there is this, and Paul pointed to it, is there seems to be these moment in Protestantism or whatever, trying to figure out what they are, or even Catholicism and everything else. And he, the point is as soon as you said that, Mark, I just remembered what Paul was talking about there.
Yeah, I gotta go, but Luke's right on the money. Especially I feel like the God man is one. Everything's gonna be fine in the end. I don't think anyone here that's trying to offer true constructive criticism or diagnostic, problems. It's not just it's not showing the nakedness of your father. It's like, okay, well, how do we take what we got and build upon it, and there's just hard conversations that need to be had. But yeah, I mean, it's Holy Week for us Orthodox, and God, Christ is risen, even though we're in the midst of Holy Week, and there's nothing to worry about in the end. So, but that doesn't mean we be lacking in work and whatnot. So
I was saying to poor Mark, for us Orthodox, good grief, I can't even make it to all the Holy Week services, let alone
and you
doing
live in
other
the
things.
cities. You live in the cities.
I know. My family's just like, how many 2 to 3 hour services are we going to this week?
Yeah, right.
Like, my wife was looking at the schedule. She's like, Friday. She's just like, should we just move in there or what?
Right.
Take work off and yeah.
And let's not even talk about bringing kids to Lamentations and Pascha and all that, But anyways, so all right. Thanks for having me on. See you guys.
See you, Joseph.
Okay, are we done, or we got something else?
So I was going to say, it is interesting. I want to talk to Sam sometime, because I'm sure this podcast will annoy him. The last time he jumped on my live stream, he said a little bit annoyed with the Orthodox right now. And I don't know what that is in Sam. It's fascinating. I'd love to talk to him about it. I mean,
I think it sounds exclusionary. I think it sounds exclusionary the way he's described it, and he's experienced a lot of exclusion.
Yeah, it's like set over and against, or if it's like some sort of weird, like zero-sum scarcity thing. If everybody becomes Orthodox, who's going to become biblical Unitarian? I don't know.
Well,
I was hoping Sam would join too, because I played that evangelical church, which is had that Orthodox priest and been talking to them, and they're going to become kind of an evangelical Orthodox church. And Sam made a very good point. Is like Protestants are really good at finding out what works. If they see something working, they'll find some way to take advantage of that and try and, like he said, he thought grab it and do it better or whatever. So I thought that he would have found, it's too bad Sam didn't have time to jump in here, because I think, I find that's another fascinating thing that's going on. It's not just this Zootown church in Missoula. Like it's happened before, but there's one right north of Kansas City that I know people were doing that. Like these are big evangelical churches that are doing it. So there's this thing that's out there. And so anyway, well, I probably should get going here. So this is always part of the conversation. I know Christian, maybe I'll jump on Christian's channel. We want to talk about that. Christian's really diving into this. He's seeing this.
One quick last thought, if you have time. I think the spirit of this age really does want us to the spirit of this age is against us building community. I mean, if you really believe in things like that, I mean, that seems to me the thing that I find most difficult to resist is the tendency to just want to just not deal with it, give up. You go to church and you experience the Spirit of God there, but boy, within a matter of hours, it's just like something comes up and you're tempted to just walk away. And I think there's something about it. It's just I don't know if it's the culture. I don't know if it's the actual devil. I don't know what's at work. But there's something that just does not want us to live in community with each other. Now we'll do it. We'll organize to get to present resistance to each other. We'll organize to fight each other, but we're not really good at organizing to live with each other in community. You know what I mean?
Well, Mark, I think I would argue, I don't know, I was talking to Pete this morning from Strange Theology, and I really think it comes down to after Christ. This is where I'm really very much in Girard camp, where I think all the plethora of choices in the smorgasbord of religious practice is really simplified. It's Christ and Antichrist, or it's Babel versus Pentecost. And my hope is what TLC is Pentecost. It's we're all speaking our own languages from our own traditions, from our own cultures, and hopefully we're all understanding each other and hearing each other in our own languages, even though we have a true diversity. That's Pentecost, unity amidst diversity, versus identical replicationism, trying to build a tower to heaven. You know, those are the only options.
Mark, I think that's it, right? Like the spirit of this age that keeps us just isolated, staring into these attention monitors. There's something going on with this that's happening to us. I think you can see the spirit of certain movements. The inclusion movement is actually a separating movement, right? And there's all these forces that are trying to take us out of community, to take us out of communion. I think that's absolutely it. And I think it goes back to the very thing that happened. What happened in the garden was a certain amount of separation, right?
Lance, what's so interesting though, that's going away too. A friend just sent me this Overtime with Bill Maher clip with, what's his name? Andrew Calloway? Scott Galloway, and Don Lemon. And Don Lemon on there said, DEI is good, there's good stuff about it, but it's become a religion. It's become a cult where you kick out anyone who doesn't stick to the status quo. Don Lemon said that. So, whatever. I think all that kind of stuff, the inclusion, the exclusivist inclusives, that's going away too. It's already dead. People just don't know it.
You're seeing it play out on college campuses here right now, and so there are still people that are the faithful that are in it, and particularly young people. I think without enough experience, like me, Don's a little bit old enough, and it will play its way out. I wish, as long as they weren't violent, they'd just let them occupy, and I'd put microphones in front of them and just allow them to speak all over the place, right? Because I think free speech is great. Let people say exactly what they think, and I think a lot of people would be shocked. But this too shall pass.
That's what that one trigonometry guy did. They were just recently on Rogan, and they played some clips where they went out to all the Free Palestine things and just unedited, just talked to people. They don't have a clue what they're talking about. They have no idea what they're even saying.
Yeah. Let them speak, and it's okay. We all have to run our own race. We're all on our own paths. It's the same reason why in 12-step groups, if someone doesn't think they've had enough drinking, the recommendation is okay, go keep trying, do more of that and see where that gets you. And when that doesn't work out for you, come on back. We'll be here for you.
You got to get to the bottom of the bottle.
All right, good points, guys. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Letting me on. Bless you.
Oh, it's good to see you, Mark, Lance. See you guys.
Hey, what's everybody? Bye-bye.
The catchphrase I say go to church. And what I mean by that is, in some ways, you have to engage in the human relationships around you. That's the best way to go about that. You have relationship, you have a family, you have some kind of community around you. And so that's the best place to go, because in some ways that's the place that will have this procedural aspect to it that will ground the other stuff. It's like if you have to to help your kids with their homework, or you have to do this kind of really grounded stuff that has very little to do with the ideology. You get engaged in other people's lives, then it binds you in a different way, right? It binds you.
And then my father would he was going to church, and I wasn't really living with him, but he was going to church, and he would like kind of those are elements of this conversation. Is I got to go to church.
It's being part of a church is part of Christian discipleship, and in that word discipleship, there's this word discipline, which is it's a discipline to go to church.
What would be so great about actually going to a church is like you start going to a church so that when you do need like to be prayed for, when you have something to be prayed for about, you have a place to just say that.
You're dead on right, Grizz, and that is what the church is for. To know and be known, to love and be loved, to have a place to go where people can pray for you, where they will welcome you in. And this is, again, part of why I want churches to have estuaries, because it is, I know that it is difficult in many churches for people to, in a sense, come in and bring their real self. And what I mean by that is have to say what's on their mind, or you can't wrestle with them. It's like, so Plato, as John reminds us, is broad, so he's a wrestler. You can't wrestle over a screen. So maybe if it's paintball for Jesus, maybe it should be wrestling with Plato. Because, and in church, in a real space, now often it doesn't happen. I understand that, but at least there's a chance to actually have a relationship with grit. And that's part of why churches are local, they're relational, they're face-to-face, they're in real life.
Said about why would young people want to go to church, and I feel like I want to have some kind of dynamic message or something that if they do find some reason to come, I'm trying to fish, so I'm throwing bait and I'm trying to hook somebody. It's what Paul is doing too. He said about being evangelical. It's evangelism of some sort.
Well, fishers of men is the promise, yes?
Yes, correct.
It's possessed. We did go to church today. I took communion.
I don't go to church to think or to rationalize God. I go to church to worship him. Right? And that's, I'm happy with that. I'm very happy with that. And afterwards, during coffee hour, we can all argue about the God of our understanding, right? Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that the wild twin, the thing that led to my sort of dawning to consciousness of Christianity was a 101-day vigil that I did in a forest. And I went into the forest.
You don't have to go crazy.
Yeah.
You actually have to go, you have to humble yourself and and do it right here, right now, right?
Get up. I like how Father Schmemann talks about it for the life of the world. He says it starts when you get up and get ready and you walk or you go to church. You start those are simple. I get up. I brush my teeth, I take a shower, I put on clothes, I go, the things of life, and we're ascending up into heaven. You're